L.P.V.O. Low Power Variable Optics. That's what we're going to talk about today in this episode of Gunfighter Life. The ins and outs, all kinds of different aspects of these optics. With that, welcome to the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, gear, the right way with God Almighty at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Some of that experience: military, law enforcement, private security contracting, competition shooting, hunting. Bio bullet points in the show notes. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Okay, a couple of things off the bat here. This is not L.P.V.O. versus red dot. I've done an episode on that. So this is not that. This is not comparing an L.P.V.O. to like a traditional 3-9. This is assuming that you're looking at getting an L.P.V.O. and comparing L.P.V.O.s. That is what we're talking about today. I also want to say that I was an early adopter of L.P.V.O.s on something other than a competition rifle. I was hardcore into competition shooting in the mid-2000s and into 3-gun. And I was also a law enforcement officer. I worked some specialized assignments, doing some specialized stuff. That's all I'll say about that. And I was like, this setup on an AR with an L.P.V.O. is really good for this. Why would this not be good on a fighting rifle, on a go-to, policing carbine? So I did that, and I ran it, and that was, again, very early. I'm not going to say I was the first one, because who could even know that? But this was back in the day when you were running iron sights, or you were running, like, the tactical thing of the day was a holographic sight like an EOTech. Again, L.P.V.O.s on tactical rifles weren't really a thing like many other things in the firearms world. Stuff gets proven out in competition, and then it trickles down into military law enforcement use. Same thing happened with red dots on handguns, ports on handguns. Similar thing happened here. It happened when I was like, this works really well for shooting up close and fast and personal, and then also reaching out there if I have a couple of shots that are farther out and I have the time to dial up in magnification. So, again, I was an earlier adopter of that. It was back when it was hard to find an L.P.V.O., for that type of use. Now they're everywhere. So I've long been a proponent of the L.P.V.O. I like an L.P.V.O. One of the big advantages of them is the low power. And I'm going to say for tactical use, and they're useful for more than that, but for tactical use, you're probably going to have it on the lowest setting, or you should have it on the lowest setting a bunch of the time. So the low setting is important. The reason for an L.P.V.O. versus another kind of optic is that you can crank it down to that low power, and it's not quite as fast as a red dot, right? A red dot is going to be faster, to be fair, as long as it works, because without batteries it won't. But assuming it works, it will be faster because you don't have to worry about head box. Now, if your technique is perfect, then it won't make any difference. But your technique is almost never perfect, and especially when you're doing things like, shooting on your side, shooting in different positions, running and gunning, shooting on the move, shooting around corners, your head position and stuff is going to shift. So for stuff like that, the red dot's going to be faster. But it's really fast. It can be really fast to shoot with an L.P.V.O. Also, L.P.V.O.s should have an etched reticle. All the ones I'm aware of have an etched reticle, meaning if there's no power, the optic still works. If you've got no power in a red dot, then the red dot is useless. It's just a window. I guess it's not useless. You could look through it like a window. But you get the idea. So L.P.V.O.s have that. Also, obviously, you get the advantage of having magnification. Now, you can do that with a red dot and a magnifier, but then you got two separate systems. You have 4 lenses. You have a bunch of other stuff that could go wrong. You have a bunch of weird mounts and stuff a lot of times. So you get the idea. I'm a big proponent of the L.P.V.O. Not all L.P.V.O.s are created equal. I am going to say something that's probably going to tick many of you off. I think a lot of people buy L.P.V.O.s based on price point and how much magnification can I get for that price point. And that's probably not even close to what should be important to you. Obviously, money is real. It's a real thing, right? Unless you're going to steal something, which you shall not steal. You got to pay for it, and you can only buy what you can afford. So I get that, but the magnification for the money should probably be very, very low on the list. Because here's the thing, most L.P.V.O.s are going to be at least 1 to 4. Shooting out to, let's say, 600 yards on reasonable sized targets, whether that be medium-sized game or for defensive use, 4 power is way more than enough. And in general, 4 powers are going to be lighter, which means the rifle is generally going to balance better. And they can be pretty affordable. So I think a 1 to 4 is generally ideal. Now, you may decide that you need or should have or would, glean some advantage from a higher power L.P.V.O. But for most people, I'm going to tell you a 1 to 4 is probably your best option. Also, there are several L.P.V.O.s that are a 1 to 4 that have a 1-inch tube. I like a 1-inch tube. Getting back to balance, whether it's a hunting rifle or a tactical rifle. If you shoot like a man, with your body position, not off a bipod or a tripod or a bench, other than sighting in, if you're doing any kind of practical shooting or what I would call, I don't want to say, the kind of hunting that I like to do, spot and stalk, still hunting, shooting, standing, sitting, kneeling, prone, not, sitting on a bench or having a giant tripod apparatus with a bunch of electronics sitting on your butt all day glassing, and then you just clamp your rifle into some giant abomination and shoot. But if you're actually wielding your gun, as an extension of yourself, not being top heavy is kind of important. So lighter is generally better. So I like a 1-inch tube. You can find a lot more. It's not a shall, but I can find a lot more 1 to 4s with a 1-inch tube. I like a 1-inch tube. They're lighter, they're sleeker, they generally balance better. They're also, probably going to stick off of your gun less, so they're going to get snagged less going through doors, slings, molly gear, body armor tend to get snagged less, so there's that, going through brush if you're hunting. So the 1-inch tube thing, don't overlook that. I think that's often overlooked. I think people want something that looks cool on Instagram or whatever kids are using nowadays. I don't have social media. I don't even have television. But they want something that looks like some giant tactical abomination and some, airsoft fantasy because it looks cool so they can post it. But that's probably the opposite of what you should want. You should want something sleek and svelte and as minimalist as possible that gets the job done well. So weight and balance is also important. And again, I like the 1-inch tube, not a shall. 30-inch tube is bigger. There's even 34-inch and even some bigger giant ones, especially going like the 1 in 10s. Those things are freaking obese. So be mindful of that. Also, eye relief. We should talk about that. Make sure that the L.P.V.O. is going to have the proper eye relief for what you want. That goes for any scope, but I should touch on it here for the L.P.V.O. Some are more forgiving than others. So depending on your application, how forgiving that eye box is, that eye relief is, that is something to consider. I'm going to try and go in some kind of order here, but lenses, the clarity of the lenses, the quality of the lenses, the optical quality is also important. Again, not if you're just doing it to post on some social media thing, but if you actually want to look through it, how clear it is and how well it transmits light is very important, so don't overlook that. Let's talk about, let's go on the outside. Let's talk about the mounts. Mounts are as important as the optic itself. You need good quality mounts, and nothing irks me more than seeing somebody with like a traditional style swept comb rifle, like a traditional hunting rifle with a traditional stock, and they put an AR mount on their optic. Like, what are you doing? or the reverse. They have like an AR and they have traditional scope rings. Like, what are you doing? Those are made for a reason. Okay, so they have two completely different stock setups with two completely different head postures and relation to the sights. So AR is the tactical rifle of our day. I don't like many things about it. One of the things I don't like about it is the buffer tube, but it's necessary for the operation of the firearm. Because it has a buffer tube, the stock has to go straight back. It can't sweep down like a traditional shotgun or rifle or a traditional ergonomic style that has been developed for good reason over centuries. The AR kind of vomits that all out because it needs a straight stock. Because it needs a straight stock, you have to have really tall sights. That's why the AR M16 platform has those really tall sights. They're like a big giant front sight post and the carry handle traditionally. It has those really high sights because you have to, because if they were, a half inch off the barrel like a Ruger 1022, you wouldn't be able to get your head down to see through them. For that reason, if you're shooting that kind of straight stock rifle, you're going to want AR style mounts, that higher style mount, 1 piece or 2 piece or whatever, but you're going to want that height of mount. Does that make sense? If you're shooting a traditional swept down gun like a Ruger 1022 or a Mini 14, or you pick your bolt action hunting rifle that's not one of the new chassis things, but a traditional hunting rifle with a traditional stock, you don't want that kind of mount. Nothing tells me like this person is lost in the sauce, like seeing one of those mounts on a traditional rifle. So get the proper mounts. Mounts are important. A lot of the L.P.V.O.s will come with mounts. Make sure you have a good quality mount. You may or may not decide that you want QD mounts. QD mounts can be important, obviously, if you have backup iron sights, which you should if it's a fighting rifle, or even I'm a big proponent of iron sights on hunting rifles. Either setup, you can get QD mounts. That's important. Good rock-solid mounts are important. Some of my favorite styles, though, are not necessarily QD, but they have a giant bolt or a flat head screw, because that's close enough to QD for me. If I need to get them off in the field, I can get them off. If it's some, Torx 25-bit or Allen wrench thing to get it off, that requires a specialty tool, which I really am not probably going to do in a hurry in the field. So be mindful of the mounts. They are very important. You could have the best rifle in the world, the best optic in the world. If you got janky mounts that can't hold a zero, then the whole system's kind of out the window. So don't skimp over on the mounts. Now going to the outside of the optic, the controls. Again, here I lean towards the majority of the time, sleek and svelte, just knobs that are not adjustable from the outside. Like you have to take the cap off to adjust the elevation and the windage. I don't want some optic where the adjustments are exposed, meaning if I just reach up and crank something, it's going to move. I don't want that. I repeat, I don't want that. If it's a practical rifle, if you're just going to shoot off a bench and then put it in a hard case and then post pictures of it, that's fine. But if you're actually going to use it in the field hunting or in a tactical scenario, the odds are at some point, you're going to bump that off of true and it's not going to be zeroed anymore. So I'm against those for that reason. You go up, one of the most important shots of your life and you bring the gun up and you've been hiking for who knows how many miles and your fidget spinners for men have been moved. Get good simple adjustments, good positive clicks. A good quality scope with positive adjustments is important. But get those, adjust it, and then put the caps on and then lock it down so it can't be moved. Simplicity is often better than complexity in these kind of scenarios, and especially on rifles. I know that's probably the opposite of what GunTube, glitterati, and marketing would have you believe, but I'm a big fan of simple and sleek. So there's that on the controls. The other thing I'm going to say on simple is reticle. Now, if you're just going to shoot max point blank range and get a good zero, a good BZO on your rifle, just a good old school duplex reticle will be fine. One of my favorite go-to ARs, in fact, that one from Days of Yore that I mentioned from the mid-2000s. I've still got the original optic L.P.V.O. in there they don't even make that model anymore, but it's just got a simple duplex reticle. That's how old that thing is. And I've used that in all kinds of scenarios in the real world, anything from tactical operations to varmint hunting. It's a fine, minimalist, very good, rugged L.P.V.O. It has a simple crosshair reticle, a simple duplex reticle. And for your average carbine inside of 300 meters, it's fine. For your average hunting rifle, if you're going to hunt with an L.P.V.O., which has some real advantages, out to your max point blank range, which depending on your cartridge is like 225, 275 yards, it's going to be fine and simple. Now, I don't mind a little bit of complexity in my reticle. I don't mind a couple of hash marks. Like, I've got my 0, let's say a 50-250, so it's 0 at 50, it's 0 again at 250, and it's an inch and a half, an inch and 3/4 high at 100 and whatever the max ordinance is, 125, 150. So I don't even have to worry about that. And then when I get out to 300, I'm a few inches low and I have a hash mark. And I'm a little bit lower than that at 300 and 350 and I have hash marks. I'm okay with that as long as they're simple and they're not in the way. What I'm not a fan of is what I would call like the murdered clown reticle syndrome, where people think that more is better and it looks super tactical and it looks like somebody took a clown in a blender and then threw it in the scope. And you've got a bunch of red and a bunch of black and a bunch of bright stuff, and you've got marks here and there and everywhere, and it's just ridiculous. That complication is not going to help you. It's only probably going to hurt you in real-world scenarios. So avoid the dead clown reticle. I know that's rampant in a bunch of the L.P.V.O.s. That takes a big chunk of the L.P.V.O.s off the market. I know that. I get it. And that stinks that they do that. But a lot of people think, ooh, this looks tactical. It must be better. This thing's giant, and it's got a bunch of vomit in the reticle, and it's got a bunch of fidget spinners on it. It must be a better optic. In my opinion, that makes it, all those things make it worse. But that is a giant part of the market, so beware of that. And this is my personal opinion. Again, if you're just going to shoot it at an indoor range and then put it in a hard gun case and then post pictures of it, who cares? Because it doesn't matter. It's a pretend gun. I mean, it's a real gun, but you're pretending that you're doing something practical with it. If you're actually going to do practical stuff with it, like hunt hard or do tactical operations with it, that stuff is probably not what you want, in my opinion. So beware the reticle. Also beware of weight. Again, I like lighter, and lighter doesn't mean cheaper. There are a lot of really good optics that are pretty light. Some of the Leupold's can be really light with the L.P.V.O.s, and some of the Trijicons can be really light with their L.P.V.O.s. So the Trijicons are a little bit bigger, but they can also be very lightweight, even though they have like a 30-millimeter tube. We should also get into illumination. Trijicon, the only one that I'm aware of that makes an L.P.V.O. that doesn't require batteries that's illuminated. It's tritium and fiber optic. I really like that system. I really like those. Much like the ACOG, which is not an L.P.V.O. but similar, the Advanced Combat Optical Gun Sight, but they have many models of L.P.V.O. that are also dual illuminated, fiber optic and tritium, meaning they run off radiation and ambient light. So as long as there's either ambient light or the half-life of that radiation is still good, then that optic will work without a battery. There's no batteries in it. So it's a non-electronic illuminative reticle. If it's for really hard use, I like that. That said, they are spendy. So many models will have an illuminated reticle. That's fine. It's an L.P.V.O., so as long as it's not a cheap one where it's going to let water and stuff in, or it's not going to be a super hot environment where the battery explodes and leaks acid everywhere, which could be a problem. As long as it's not one of those scenarios, the illuminated reticles are fine. If you think you need one, if you want one, if it's legal to hunt with one where you are, and you should check that. I don't think they're super necessary. They're a nice to have, not a need to have, because if you're running any kind of tactical carbine, you're probably going to have a white light on it. And if you have a white light and you're using your white light, guess what? You can see a regular reticle, so you don't really need the illuminated reticle. Nice to have, not a need to have. Also, if you're hunting, even if they allow illuminated reticle, unless you're doing like eradication style hunting, you probably can't hunt except for certain times, and that's daylight hours. You're not hunting at night anyway. So the illuminated reticle is not really going to help you there. There are certain situations like it's kind of dark, or you're in a really thick forest and you're hunting a black bear with a black reticle, there are situations where an illuminated reticle can help if you have the time to even turn it on or off or whatever. But again, I think it's a nice to have, not a need to have. I'm not sponsored by any companies. I want to say that before I throw some models out there. The number one I'm going to recommend for both practical hunting and for a good tactical setup on an AR, one of my number one recommendations, and has been for a long time, I own several of these. I have to think pretty hard about how many. That is the L.P.V.O.s Freedom 1.5 to 4 Pigplex reticle. I love the Pigplex reticle, both for practical hunting distances and for tactical stuff, because it's got a really good balance of you can use it really quickly, and also you can get some precision if you need to. So I like that Pigplex reticle. I wish it was more common in their other lines of stuff, but it's sometimes hard to find. The Pigplex, it's fantastic. Their other one, it's called something like the MOA ring reticle. It's got like a tactical sounding name, but ironically, I like it less for tactical stuff, more so for maybe hunting. I like the Pigplex more for tactical stuff. It's got a really thick, aggressive, outer edge of the reticles, which I like if you're trying to find something quickly. But if you can't find that one, the MOA ring is also a pretty good reticle in there. Then obviously, if you're just going to keep it in, inside 250 or 300 yards, just a simple duplex reticle is good. I think they have all of those options available or have been available in that L.P.V.O.s Freedom, VX Freedom line. And it's a 1-inch tube. It's very light. They're crazy rugged. They're fantastic. They're American made. The other one is that I really like is the Trijicon that I aforementioned. You just look up their L.P.V.O. dual illuminated. I don't know if they make one that's not dual illuminated, but they're dual illuminated, tritium and fiber optic. It's a very, very good. If you're like building your ultimate apocalypse rifle, that would be probably the one. That's the one that's on my go-to if I'm picking a rifle with no caveats for the apocalypse, for balloon hitting the fan time, right? I've got one of those Trijicons on there. So they're fantastic. Also, they have a simple German post style reticle, which is good. That's what I have on mine. They have other reticles. I think they have green, red, and amber, depending on your environment, which I guess you can use this for other stuff too. It's a little myopic talking about this, but I like green. I also live out west where a lot of stuff is more brown. If you were in a really green environment like the southeast, it's basically a jungle there a big chunk of the year, you may not want a green reticle. If you're somewhere super green like that, you might like the amber reticle. And red is red. It's kind of the standard. I don't like it as much, but red works just fine. Of all the L.P.V.O.s that I'm aware of, they're going to have, if they're battery power, they're going to have red. Red is, I believe, just it lasts longer, like a red lens, a red light, like if you're talking about a red dot versus a green dot and a system powered by electronics and batteries. I think in general, for whatever reason, I'm not a physicist, right? But the red lasts longer, like a battery life-wise. Which the next one I'm going to talk about is a battery-powered one, and it is the Sig Tango 1-4. Why would I get the 1-4 and I can get a 1-6 or a 1-8 or a 1-10? Well, I'm not sure about this, but the other ones that I'm aware of in the 1-6, 1-8, 1-10, they have that murdered clown reticle that I talked about that I kind of loathe in there. The Tango 1-4s, they're not overly expensive. I think they're the cheapest one I'm mentioning here. They come with a mount also for an AR if you're mounting it on an AR style rifle. And there's a good quality mount too. And they're very well made. They're very clear. I've used them not as long as the other ones I've mentioned, but I've used them enough. I think I can recommend them. They're going to be, at least the models that I have, they're battery powered. which again I think is a nice to have, not a need to have. But they have like a BDC style reticle, which I can tolerate. It's good. It's not overly complicated. It has holdovers. If you want to shoot out past, 250 or 300 yards. And again, I like that system, and that's why I would recommend that one. If they make a higher powered one without that ridiculous reticle, then I would say go for that if you need the higher power. Okay. Obviously, a lot of things I talked about here are personal preference, and my use cases probably differ from many other people's use cases. Tactical tip of the day: when you're setting up that eye relief, when you're mounting your optic on your rifle, if you're doing practical stuff, probably the majority, we're not talking about belly guns here. We're not talking about guns that you shoot off a bench or like laying down most of the time. But when you're setting your eye relief, in general, make sure you're mindful of that you can see through the optic well when you're laying down. And when you're mounting your optic, you want to crank it up to maximum power because it's a lot less forgiving of eye relief when you're mounting it, not running it all the time. But when you're mounting your eye relief, make sure you crank the power all the way up, because if you crank it all the way down to 1, you're not really going to know what the optimal eye relief is, how far the optic is away from your eye. And you also want to get down into the prone and check it, because a lot of times your head position will change just naturally. So make sure when you get down in the prone, you're not going to give yourself scope eye, and when the gun goes off, you're going to get a giant gash above your eye because it's too close, because you didn't pay attention to that when you mounted the optic. That's a real thing that happens. Ask me how I know. That's why I'm giving you the tactical tip. Right? I bleed so you can bleed less. Right? So, yeah, that's the thing. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command you today for your good. That also, I read that this morning, that reminded me of another passage. That is from Deuteronomy. This is from the Gospel of John. These are the words of Jesus. If you love me, keep my commandments. And again, just under that, he who has my commandments and keeps them is he who loves me. So, right, it's the same God from Deuteronomy, from Genesis to Revelation, right, but all throughout the Bible. So just the continuity of those two verses, those couple of passages, 3 passages, I guess. That kind of struck me. I'll read one of those again. He who has my commandments and keeps them is he who loves me. All right, guys, I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you do, and have a blessed day.